In this video, I want to show you all promising underdogs, the best inexpensive favorites, and the best bets to consider for this weekend. I'll also provide my final probability for each fighter's victory, along with their stat differentials. If you find this informative, helpful, or entertaining, please like and subscribe. It really helps keep me motivated to create these videos for you all. I've also added my Patreon information in the description if you want to support me there. There's a $10 a month contribution tier and a $20 a month premium tier. The premium tier gives you early access to all of the analysis and results from my videos, along with the additional data analysis and stats. This includes my prediction model results, fighter history, stat overviews, promising underdogs, best inexpensive favorites, prop bets to consider, and deep dives into each fighter's record and historical fights. So you'll get to see their strengths, their weaknesses, their consistency across different stats, and their stat comparisons versus all of their historical opponents' averages. All of this combined will help you with your picks and bets. There's a $20 a month tier, which is around $5 per event, and you can also purchase each of these separately, but the membership is cheaper and easier. Plus, you're directly helping with the improvement and expansion of the content for this channel. Running this data, analysis, and prediction models takes hours every day and week, so I'd greatly appreciate any support that you can show. And thank you to everyone who has shown me support recently. Also, if you like detailed breakdowns and predictions, I do those weekly for full cards as well, including prelim fights, so feel free to check those out on my channel. Let's go ahead and jump right in. First, let's take a look at promising underdogs. The fighters' names are on the leftmost column, followed by their probability of victory that I presented in the prediction video from earlier this week. These probabilities are not only based on several data science prediction models that are trained for accuracy, but also on qualitative information such as the fighter's momentum, their recent performances, their career's trajectory, psychological factors, their training camps, their weight cuts, and any other available information out there. I've also provided the stat advantages for each fighter compared to their opponent, excluding differentials where one of the fighters has a 0 in their stats in order to avoid misleading information. Alright, so let's get started. The first promising underdog that I want to highlight for you guys on today's card is Corey McKenna. So Corey McKenna, she has a height advantage of an inch here. She is slightly younger at about a year. She absorbs 3.13 less strikes per minute. She lands 0.68 more takedowns on average and has a 29% higher takedown defense as well. Now, all things considered, I'm giving Corey McKenna about a 42% probability of victory, and that's why I think she's a great underdog to feature, because she's very close to that 50% mark, so there's a little bit of value there if you do believe Corey McKenna can pull off the upset here. Now, disclosure, I am going for her opponent here, but again, point of this section of the video is to just highlight some opportunities. So just looking at her record, she's won 8 fights. She's finished 50% of those 8 fights. She's actually had 5 fights within the UFC, of which she's won 3 already. Now, and of course, recently she's won 3 of her last 5, so that's the momentum she's carrying into this fight. Some of the things that I like about her that I think are going in her favor is, of course, going to be her wrestling base and her grappling skills. I think that she could potentially control a fight on the ground and kind of neutralize some of Pilastri's like striking advantages. She also has a little bit better experience overall, and I like her ability to kind of implement, I would say, effective game plans that are a little bit tailored to her opponent's weaknesses. And I think that that's been a crucial thing in her previous victories and fights. Also, keep in mind she's only 24 years old, so she's continuing to improve and learn in the game as she gets more experience under her belt. She has won more UFC fights than she's lost, so I kind of like her grit overall and her ability to bounce back from losses and setbacks and stuff like that. We'll talk about bets a little bit later in this video, but all in all, bottom line, I do think Corey McKenna has a little bit of potential of pulling off an upset here, so she's the first one I wanted to highlight for you all. The next promising underdog that I want to highlight for you guys is Josh Frem. So Josh, he does have a height advantage of 6 inches in this fight. He's also 9 years younger than his opponent here. He does also have a reach advantage of 3 inches, and he absorbs 1.74 less strikes per minute while also landing 0.9 more submissions on average as well. Now, all things considered, on the probability scale, I did give Josh kind of a low score. I gave him a 32% probability of victory, but I do like the intangibles that he brings into his fights, and I'll touch base on that in a second. But first, let's talk about his record here. He's won 11 fights. He's finished 73% of his victories. Now, he's had 6 fights in the UFC, of which he's only won 2 of, so I do acknowledge that, he's not someone who's consistently amazing, which is, again, what kind of influenced that 32% probability of victory. But I will say the certain things I do like about him here is, first of all, his physical advantage in this fight. He could potentially keep Al Hassan a little bit at a distance and potentially pick him apart, depending on what kind of preparation and determination he's going to really bring into this fight, what kind of technical skills he's bringing into this fight. So I will say Josh, he is the younger fighter. Keep in mind, Al Hassan is like 38 years old, so he's kind of on the back end of his professional fighting career, especially in the UFC. It gets a little bit tough to maintain, especially getting victories, but regardless, things I like about Josh. He's kind of versatile in his fighting style. He does have wins across different methods, and Al Hassan, I'm not saying he is not a versatile fighter, but he kind of relies a lot on his knockout power. So one thing I will say in respect to Josh and his potential is that he is a little bit more versatile overall. Now, Al Hassan, he is coming off of that really weird no contest situation, which I covered in my previous video. So that could be another thing that's just in his mind lingering, could be a psychological situation there. I'm not going to lean too heavily on that, but just something I wanted to point out here. Now, I will say, Josh, I also like his recent opponents overall. Keep in mind, Al Hassan is a very dangerous and powerful fighter compared to Josh, so I am leaning towards Al Hassan here, but in terms of finding a good underdog on this card, I think Josh has some potential that I wanted to highlight for you all. All right, so the next promising underdog that I want to highlight for you guys is Pat Sabatini. Now, Pat, he does have a 5% higher striking accuracy. He also absorbs 1.9 less strikes per minute, and he lands 1.1 more submissions on average. Now, all things considered, I'm giving Pat a 45.4% probability of victory, which gets him very close to that 50% mark, and I think he's a great underdog to feature for many reasons, not only stats, not only his record, but also the intangibles and the qualitative factors that I'll cover here. So first and foremost, Pat Sabatini, he's won 18 fights. He's finished 72% of those. He's had 7 fights within the UFC, of which he's won 5, which is a good percentage there. Recently, he's won 3 of his last 5 fights, so he does have some momentum that he's carrying in, even though he's coming off of that loss. But let's talk about those reasons aside from just the stats or the record alone as to why what Pat offers in this fight. The first thing that I would say is that he really needs to utilize the grappling advantage that he has. Now, he's kind of known for his strong wrestling and submission skills. He averages more submissions per 15 minutes, at least speaking statistically. Now, I think that Sabatini, he could very likely take the fight to the ground and kind of work for those submissions. Keep in mind, a lot of his wins have come via submission, which does make him a threat over there. Now, he needs to... If Pat is able to kind of implement a control-heavy based game plan, because he is kind of that control-style wrestler, then he will probably be able to neutralize Pierce's offense by kind of maintaining like top position, for example, and just controlling him on the ground for long stretches of the fight. You only have 15 minutes, 3 rounds to get this done, right? Now, he will also have to defend takedowns very effectively. He doesn't have the best takedown defense rate overall, but he'll kind of have to manage and stuff Pierce's takedown attempts. That's going to be a constant threat in this fight. He'll also have to kind of capitalize on defensive advantages. Now, keep in mind, Pat absorbs fewer significant strikes per minute compared to Jonathan Pierce. So if he could kind of leverage some of the defense that we've seen previously in order to avoid some damage and look for maybe counter-striking opportunities or control opportunities, then that would really work in Pat's favor here. So he does have to push a very grapple-heavy pace. Pierce, one thing I'll say about him is that he is good at scrambling. And so Sabatini, I'll say he would probably be the guy who can keep opponents grounded and controlled. And so that's a very interesting dynamic between these two. But if Pat is able to kind of target those submissions and controls, he could at least take this to the judges and get a unanimous decision victory, if not getting the underdog submission or something. But I think he holds a lot of value, especially as an underdog on this card. That's why he's very close to that 50% mark with all things considered, and that's why I wanted to highlight him for you guys. Now, I was going to touch base on Chris Barnett. That was an underdog that I actually picked to win. You could see I gave him 52.5% probability to win against Tafa, but unfortunately that card was just scrapped because of the Florida hurricane situation, so that was very unfortunate. But that was also an underdog that I thought had great momentum and was coming into this fight, had great potential to pull off an upset here. I actually don't know what the odd makers were kind of thinking or leaning on, because Tafa has not done well recently, and it's not only that he hasn't done well recently, but even within fights, he just doesn't look like a fighter with a very high IQ, if I'm being honest, or someone who's extremely prepared. But he is a fun fighter. He's a cool dude, and hopefully we do get to see them run that back and reschedule that fight. And when they do, I will be taking Chris Barnett because I think that he would be able to defeat Tafa, if I'm being honest. Alright, now we're going to switch gears, and now I'm going to talk about the promising favorites for this card, which I've chosen through 3 main criteria. First, they have a high statistical weighted confidence either through my prediction models or through fighter stat evaluation, or some combination of both. Second, their opponent does not have a high probability of victory, so you're not going to notice any overlap between the underdogs I just showed you earlier and these fighters. And the third thing is that their odds aren't too expensive. If a fighter has like negative 600 or negative 700 odds, they're obviously just too expensive to pick, but you could always parlay them if you want. In this video, I'm going to focus more on finding you guys some value rather than just stating some obvious picks and pointing out those negative 600 type fighters. So I consider these 3 things for you guys, I do all the work for you guys, and then I show you the valuable picks that fit that criteria. And if you want to know how I predict each fight plays out and the results, please check out my prediction breakdown from earlier this week where I review stats, each fighter's fight history, the results of my 7 data science prediction models, my final picks, and the method of victory. Now for this portion of the video, for these favorites, I'm only going to review their stat differentials that they have against their opponent. But again, if you want those in-depth breakdowns, please refer to that video from earlier this week. It will help you out. Alright, so we are just going to fire through these and then we're going to touch base on some good bets for this card. So first inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you all is none other than Taira himself. He is 8 years younger. He has a reach advantage of 2 inches here. He has a 29% higher striking accuracy. He absorbs 1.72 less strikes per minute. He has a 1% higher striking defense. He lands 1.88 more takedowns on average, has a 22% higher takedown defense, and he lands 1 more submission on average. Now, when I initially ran the data, Taira wasn't positioned to be too expensive, but I think looking at the lines now, he might be a little bit too expensive to parlay or include. So, I mean, I'm going based off of the data I had ran initially. Taira might be a little bit expensive, if I'm being quite honest with you guys. Full transparency, right? All in all, I'm giving Taira a 72.4% probability of victory. I think he's going to do pretty good and kind of shock some people that are still doubting him. I think he's just very technically sound as a fighter. He's fun to watch, energetic, young. He's approaching his prime. He's not even in his prime. So there's a lot that he offers so far, and he's done pretty well. I mean, he's undefeated, 16 wins. Can't go wrong, right? And then MMA, of course, humbles me and proves me wrong, because that's the way the sport works, and that's why we love it. You never want to actually pick a fighter just because he's undefeated or something. You actually want to look at the style of fighting that he has or that she has and what they're bringing into MMA. You want to see their momentum. You want to see a bunch of intangibles, and you definitely want to see fight IQ. And so that was sarcasm back there where I was like, oh, he's undefeated, blah, blah, blah. So hopefully y'all picked up on that. But if you didn't, I'm just being honest with you guys. You can't just go based off of a guy who's undefeated, because in MMA, you're always going to find a bigger fish eventually, or you're going to hop out of the game before you do. And you'd probably be wise to do that. And I'm going off on a tangent here, but regardless, Taira, he does bring those intangible factors that I really like. I touch base on a lot of those in my previous video, so check that out. You know, you don't have to check out the whole thing if you don't want. Just check out that Taira section if you want some confirmation. He is expensive though, so keep that in mind, please. Alright, so the next inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you guys is Jun Young Park. Now, Park is 3 younger than his opponent here. He lands 1.15 more strikes per minute at a 7% higher striking accuracy as well, which is really good. He lands 1.05 more takedowns on average as well, and he has a 24% higher takedown accuracy, so he's pretty versatile overall. Now, all things considered, I'm giving Park a 67% probability of victory, and I think he's a great favorite to feature on this card. I really like his grappling skills, his submission skills here. I like his recent form and the bit of the striking edge he has in this matchup. So I'm excited to see him fight, and I hope he's able to get that victory. The next inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you guys is Chidi Jokwani. So Chidi, he has a height advantage of 3 inches in this matchup. He also has a reach advantage of 3 inches. He has a 12% higher striking accuracy, which goes really well with that physical advantage. He also absorbs 3.74 less strikes per minute, which again complements all of those previous stats. He has an 8% higher striking defense than his opponent here, and a 9% higher takedown defense. So I really like his stats there, at least on paper, but the way that he's able to implement them stylistically also translates very well as a fighter. So all things considered, I'm giving Chidi a 65% probability of victory, and I do also really like him as a favorite on this card. The next inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to highlight for you guys is Cody Haddon. So Cody, he's 5 years younger than his opponent here. He has a reach advantage of an inch. He lands 6.39 more strikes per minute. He has a 15% higher striking accuracy, a 23% higher striking defense. He lands 0.31 more takedowns on average, and he lands 3.2 more submissions on average. So on paper, this guy has a lot of advantages. I also like what he brings stylistically, and I touched base on that on my previous video. All in all, I'm giving Cody a 62.2% probability of victory. So that makes me really like where he's positioned in terms of how expensive he is, or how inexpensive I should say, and also just the confidence I have that logically he should be able to get the job done. So the last inexpensive and confident favorite that I want to cover before we dive into those bets is Clayton Carpenter. So Clayton, he has a height advantage of 3 inches here. He also has a reach advantage of 2 inches. He lands 3 more strikes per minute, and he also absorbs 1.3 less strikes per minute. And lastly, he does have a 27% higher striking defense. So really like those striking stats overall, and I like what he's been able to do so far overall. Now, all things considered, I'm giving a 63.1% probability of victory. I like his striking advantage. I like his defensive skills. I like his grappling defense as well. He does have a good finishing ability in my opinion, and I do like the momentum and confidence that he's bringing. So I think he has the physical advantage, the technical advantage, and the psychological advantage. Really like where he's positioned, and I look forward to seeing that fight. Now let's review the bets that I think have value for this card and have a good statistical and stylistic possibility of happening. Please disregard prop bets where you're picking the other fighter to win. I'll start from the top of the card and work my way down. You'll see that I've laid out a few options for you guys depending on how risk averse you are and how much risk you're willing to take. So starting from the top of the card, going all the way down to the first prelim. So starting with Brandon Royval versus Tatsuro Taira, I would consider taking Taira via submission. That fight is very interesting because Brandon Royval is very talented, and perhaps I haven't said that enough in this video and the previous video. Brandon Royval is very talented, and I don't actually know how to expect the fight to play out in terms of prop bets. So I played it a little bit safe in mentioning Taira via submission. I don't like any of the round bets at all for that main event. You guys might think differently, but I'm just highlighting what I've seen logically and what I've researched, right? Going to the co-main event, we have Brad Tavares versus Jun Young Park. Now, for this one, I would take Park via decision. That's where I'm leaning at. You could also take this going over 1.5, 2.5, or go in the distance depending on how risk averse you are, or how much risk you're trying to take, how much, how much you're trying to roll the dice. But I do expect this fight to kind of play out a little bit. I don't think it's going to be a quick fight at all. So going down, we have Grant Dawson versus Rafa Garcia. Now that one, I would consider taking Dawson via decision. The guy's a beast. He's done very, very well. Just look back at my previous video, look at his particular section, and you'll see why he's an absolute beast. Now, you could also take that fight over 1.5, 2.5 distance. I think it's going to play out a little bit, and I think he's going to have to get into the rhythm of things, and I don't think he could just do that within the first round itself. So up next, we have Julia Pilastri versus Corey McKenna. That's an interesting one. At the end of the day, I do think that Pilastri will win via decision, but if you guys really want to play it safe, again, with women's MMA, you can't go wrong with doing something like a over 1.5, 2.5, or distance. That is just something that it happens time and time again. So I think that would also be safe. Now, then we have Daniel Rodriguez versus Alex Morono. That's an interesting one, honestly, and full disclosure, I should have probably mentioned Alex Morono as a underdog on this card. I do like Alex Morono and his abilities, especially when it comes to like grappling, right? So all in all, I do still think Rodriguez is going to be able to eke out that decision victory over him. Regardless, a safe neutral bet for this fight would be that over 1.5, 2.5 distance, just because I think it's going to be one of those fights where, again, it takes time to play out. We're going to see a lot of grappling, a lot of control. It's not going to be, a one and done first round banger. No, nothing like that. Up next, we have Abdul Razak Al Hassan versus Josh Frem. So that one, just based on Al Hassan's power and what he's been able to do, the fact that he comes in very hot and he just fires away, I'm taking Al Hassan via KO/TKO. That's what I'm expecting out of him, and he's kind of proven that he can do that time and time again. Next, we have CJ Vergara versus Ramzan Tamirov. That's an interesting one, but I do not expect this one to go the distance. So I think the safe play would be not distance, but if you do want to get a little bit more bang for your buck, you could do the under 2.5, under 1.5. Moving on, we got Jonathan Pierce versus Pat Sabatini. Very interesting one, but I do think Pierce will get that decision victory unless Pat pulls off the upset and somehow gets like a submission or something. Regardless, if you do want to play it neutral, because this card is a little bit interesting, you could do the over 1.5, 2.5 distance if you just want to play it neutral. Sometimes playing it safe is better than just rolling the dice, right? Especially on some of these fight nights. But moving on, then we have Thema Garimbo, an absolute killer, versus Nico Price. I would take Garimbo via KO/TKO. Also, specifically, you could also take him under 2.5. I don't see this fight going all the way, if I'm being quite honest with you guys. Then we had Chris Barnett versus Junior Tafa. I expected that fight to not go the distance, and obviously you could take the under 2.5, 1.5, but sadly we did not get that. So yeah, but I'm sure they'll reschedule it and figure something out. Regardless, up next we have Dan Argueta versus Cody Allen. That's an interesting one. I think your best bet for that would probably be hat on submission, man. I think he's really good at finding a way to get that submission, so I do expect him to pull that off. I don't really like any of the round bets for that fight. And last but not least, we have Clayton Carpenter versus Lucas Rocha. This one, just to keep things simple, over 1.5, 2.5 distance. It is one of those prelim fights where you oftentimes don't really know what to expect. You could go in with one opinion and the fight totally turns out to be different. And, I've been humbled before on those prelims, so sometimes I like to play those a little bit safe. And so, I like to speak logic with you guys. I think that over 1.5, 2.5 distance is probably the safe neutral route for that fight. I do not see it being done within that first round. And, with these prop bets, sometimes they can be a little bit expensive. So, feel free to parlay and sprinkle them around here and there. And that gives you a better bang for your buck. I appreciate you guys watching. Hope you guys have a very fun event. Remember, it's earlier today. It's not at our usual fight night time. So keep that in mind. It should be in a few hours, actually. So see you guys then. And see you guys in the next one. Thank you guys. And with that said, that wraps up this video. I really appreciate you all for watching and being so supportive as always. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and check out that Patreon if you want to support me through there as well. There's a $10 a month contribution tier and a $20 a month premium tier, which includes early results, picks, and bets, and also includes premium data, analysis, and stats as well. Your support helps keep me encouraged and motivated to continue running all of this data and analysis for you guys and providing you guys all these insights. So thank you once again, and as always, see you guys in the next one.